Hi you guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I've not been uploading for a while. As you can see, I feel a bit knackered and a bit drowsy and tired. I've got like a water infection, so my voice sounds a bit terrible. And I'm coughing up. I've been coughing up a lot of phlegm and stuff, and hopefully in 2 weeks' time I should get better. Hopefully my swelling should go down. Yeah, so I thought I'd do a video about what's happening with Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, is it Karaman or something? Russian Freedom Mission or something, I don't know. Ukraine's tensions or something. About the USA and the Britons, the Americans. I mean, they got 8,000 troops there, I think, of Ukraine, I don't know. Could it kick off with Russia? Will it come to the UK? Who knows? In our country, we'll just stay there. Let's play a video. Or show a video. I'm sorry I've not uploaded for a while. I wanted to because I didn't have the energy, so hopefully in a couple of weeks I'll get better again. I just hate being ill. It's annoying. So, where's this bloody thing? See, that's what I mean. This is what, when you're poorly, happens. You just don't feel like doing anything. I'm trying to get videos out there even though I'm ill. And I'm trying to set up this video thing. So I can actually set the phone up on this speaker you can see here. There you go. That's where the phone's going to be placed. So I need to film the screen. So there's the screen. There you go. So it should be right, I think. Ukraine and the other things. Some people like to talk about war, and some people don't. And some people say war is not a good thing, which isn't. I will not stay there, but I'm trying to bounce the phone so you can actually get a better picture. There you go. I don't think it's going to bounce the whole way. Trying to get everything in all at once is a bit of annoying. Oh, no, it's not balancing. Sorry this is taking me so long, but eventually we will get there. The road wasn't built in a day.
Washington has placed more than 8,000 US-based troops on a heightened state of alert, and NATO is sending more warships and fighter jets to member states in Eastern Europe.
Oh,
in the region
fell over again.
The President Putin has publicly stated his belief that Russia and Ukraine are one people. He claims that one of his key concerns is the expansion of NATO, that's the military alliance of European states with the US and Canada. Many countries in Eastern Europe became members of NATO after the fall of the Soviet Union. Mr. Putin's demand that Ukraine never be allowed to join NATO has been rejected. From Kiev, our correspondent Gabriel Gatehouse sent this report.
This is a country in limbo, waiting for an invasion that looks more likely with every passing day, but may yet never come. To the east, 100,000 Russian troops amassed, but the Kremlin says talk of an invasion is hysteria. Facing them are Ukrainian soldiers who hear Western leaders sounding the alarm in ever starker tones. And stuck in between are the people of Kiev who, frankly, don't know what to believe.
I think something might happen. I think the probability is very high, but God knows. I think even Putin doesn't know yet what kind of decision he's going to take. But the situation is horrible.
At the weekend, Britain warned that Russia was planning a coup to install a little-known former MP as puppet ruler, suggestions that have been widely dismissed both in Moscow and here in Kiev. The UK began pulling staff out of its embassy today, saying an invasion could come at any time. The Americans are doing the same. A senior Ukrainian politician told the BBC today such actions are not helpful.
If people start panicking, that leaves our country in a very dangerous position, and it will make it easier for Russia to manipulate us.
The reality is, of course, that this country is already at war and has been since 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea and funded and provided weapons and sent in troops to support a separatist rebellion in the east. Around 14,000 Ukrainians have already died in that conflict. These are some of their faces. And so, for people here, the question is not, will there be war, but will this war escalate? For months now, the Ukrainians have been preparing a territorial defense force. Volunteers like Marta Yuskif, a doctor in her 50s, is among those who are training for a possible defense of Kiev.
Of course I'm worried, because I'm a peaceful woman. I don't want to have a war started, but in any case, in case it started, I should be ready to defend the country.
Meanwhile, a kind of normal life continues as the people of this country wait nervously to see what fate and larger geopolitical forces have in store. Gabriel Gatehouse, BBC News, Kiev.
Well, this evening, President Biden led a conference call with European leaders to discuss the crisis in Ukraine. And all day, Western leaders have been warning Russia of the consequences of invading that country. There were statements early this evening from the Pentagon in Washington and from NATO, but we start with the UK.
Invading Ukraine, from a Russian perspective, is going to be a painful, violent and bloody business. And I think it's very important that people in Russia understand that this could be a new Chechnya.
NATO is a defensive alliance which does not threaten Russia or any other country. But we will always do what is necessary to protect and defend all our allies. And I welcome that allies are stepping up.
The United States will act firmly in defense of its national interests in response to actions by Russia that harm us, our allies, our partners.
Well, in a moment, we'll be talking to our Moscow correspondent, Steve Rosenberg, for the latest there. First to Washington, our correspondent, Barbara Platt-Asher. Barbara, acting firmly, said the Pentagon spokesman. Does that mean in economic terms with sanctions, or does it mean in military terms, possibly?
Well, it means both, actually, Hugh. They have been saying all along that there would be severe sanctions if the Russians send troops over the border into Ukraine, financial sanctions, export controls on technology that's needed for key industries, that sort of thing, but also militarily. Now, the Americans are not going to be sending troops to Ukraine. They've made that very clear. Actually, Ukraine, of course, is not a NATO ally, so they don't have that obligation, but they are sending weapons and increasing numbers of weapons. What they have announced now is that they are prepared to send troops to Eastern Europe, to NATO allies in Eastern Europe as part of a NATO reaction force if one is called up on the border with Russia, that they are on alert. They have not yet been deployed. And all of this is in the language of unity and resolve. There's been a real push in the last couple of days to again project unity between the United States and Europe and NATO, and that was at least part of the impetus for the call that President Biden held with European leaders here this afternoon. In fact, there's been quite a ramp up of the rhetoric of alarm over the past couple of days, although the security situation itself, while worrying, hasn't really changed that much. So there's been some criticism that the West is contributing to the escalation, but the State Department really rejected that quite strongly when we asked about it today. They said, no, this is all about deterrence and defense.
Barbara, many thanks for the thoughts there in Washington. Let's go to Moscow and talk to Steve Rosenberg. Steve, these statements, this attempted projection of unity, deployment of troops, we've already talked about that in the past few days. What's the reaction there in Russia then?
Well, I mean, the Russians have already criticised what they call Western hysteria over Ukraine, and they will surely apply the same label to any future Western troop deployment. I think the problem for NATO now is it sees a threat, so naturally it wants to boost security for its allies and its partners, and that means deploying more warships and more fighter jets and potentially thousands of troops to Eastern Europe. But the danger of that is that it plays into the Kremlin's narrative that the West threatens Russia's national security, and that sparks more muscle flexing by Moscow and more instability. Having said that, I think the Kremlin could see today that the one thing that muscle flexing and saber rattling is bad for is the financial markets, because what we saw today, Russian stocks falling sharply, the Russian ruble fell against the dollar and the dollar against and the pound, and that adds to a sense here that many people are concerned about where all of this is leading.
Steve, many thanks again. Steve Rosenberg with the latest thoughts there in Moscow, and Barbara Pletasher in Washington.
Well, next one, I think. On to this one.
Tensions between Russia and the West are growing rapidly. A Russian military buildup is visible on the ground and from the air. In 2014, Russia took military action in Ukraine, and concerns are again running high.
It is the right time to remind the whole world that Ukraine has been living under the threat of invasion, and for some parts for Ukraine, real invasion and occupation for the past 8 years. But this time it really feels different.
It feels different to Western countries too. They gathered in Geneva and issued this warning.
First, we've been very clear that if there is any further Russian aggression in terms of sending Russian forces into Ukraine, there will be a swift, there will be a severe, and there will be a united response.
But tension between the West and Russia isn't new, nor is Russian pressure on Ukraine. So why is this escalation happening? Well, here are 6 reasons, 3 short-term, 3 long-term. First of all, Ukraine became independent in 1991 after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But Vladimir Putin still sees deep cultural and political ties. Last year he wrote, "I said that Russians and Ukrainians were one people, a single whole." And as Ukraine's relationship with the West has deepened, so is Putin's determination to stop this from happening. Here's the BBC's Steve Rosenberg.
Some people here believe that Mr. Putin sees himself as a leader on an historic mission to try to bring Ukraine back into Russia's orbit, and not only to do that, but to re-establish for Moscow a sphere of influence in this part of the world.
Our second reason is what happened in 2014. Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine and supported separatists in the east. And for some there, this was welcome.
I'll check and see why it's gone blue.
Recognition is very important for our republic.
Oh, there we go.
We fought for this. We spilled our blood for this. The end goal is to be part of the Russian
Sorry if the TV's gone a bit blue, but
Russia denies that's the end goal.
the
but
blue
its support
room.
for separatists is real, and it was hit with a range of Western sanctions because of 2014. And there's been a military consequence too. Ukraine's army is now almost twice as big as it was in 2014. Third, well, we need to look at NATO's expansion. NATO is a military alliance dominated by the US, but with most members in Europe. This map on the NATO website shows us Russia in the east, and light blue coloured countries are all NATO members. Some of them are former members of the Soviet Union, something Putin says is a broken promise.
We won't move 1 inch towards the east, they told us in the 1990s. And what happened? They deceived us. They brazenly tricked us.
The West categorically denies this, but Russia remains infuriated, not least when Ukraine takes part in joint military exercises with NATO, or when the European Union says things like this.
As ever, the European Union stands by Ukraine in these difficult circumstances. We are very firm in our resolve.
Russia wants NATO to pull back. NATO says it won't. And if those are 3 longer-term reasons, here are 3 reasons why this has escalated recently, starting with Putin's view of attitudes in Ukraine. This poll is from September last year, showing 81% of Ukrainians saying they have a negative attitude about Putin.
Yep.
Or there's this statement from Ukraine's president.
We have everyone's full and permanent support by Ukraine's international partners, by Europe, and United States in particular.
Ukraine is still getting closer to the West despite Putin's efforts. He may have concluded a different tactic is needed, which leads us to our next reason, the state of the West. Bruno Massais is of the Hudson Institute, and he's tweeted, "I think 2 developments shaped Putin's decision to intensify the conflict, the Afghanistan debacle and Merkel's departure." Some argue America's unilateral withdrawal from Afghanistan demonstrated a lack of Western unity. This former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump argues whatever happened in Afghanistan had a ripple effect with Ukraine. Russia will think this is my time. America's weak. It's disorganized. Now, of course, Joe Biden wouldn't agree with that. But the West didn't act as one in Afghanistan, nor is it doing so in Ukraine. The US is sending military hardware to Ukraine. Germany isn't.
Den Export von letalen Waffen.
Germany has not supported the export of lethal weapons in recent years.
As well as this, the head of the German Navy resigned after saying giving Putin respect is low cost, even no cost. It's easy to give him the respect he demands and probably deserves. Putin may see these differences as an opportunity, though the West insists it is not. What is beyond dispute is our final reason, what everyone can see with their own eyes, this enormous Russian troop buildup on the border with Ukraine. This is the immediate reason for the escalation, because as the Russians build up, so now does the West. The US has given Ukraine what it calls 90 tons of lethal aid. The UK is also sending equipment, and it's been noted.
Our Western associates are escalating the situation by supplying Kiev with lethal modern weapons